The private jet of Ethan Caldwell, a 42-year-old white American billionaire, landed smoothly on the runway of Norman Manley Airport, Kingston, Jamaica, on a radiant June afternoon. The Gulfstream G650, with its luxurious leather interior and lavish amenities, was a symbol of the real estate empire Ethan had built over 2 decades. From skyscrapers in Manhattan to resorts in Dubai, he had bought and sold properties across the globe, turning numbers on paper into billion-dollar deals. But as the aircraft door opened, a warm breeze filled the cabin, carrying the scent of sea salt and tropical flowers of Jamaica. Ethan felt something different, a sensation he couldn't quite name, but it expanded his chest. With neatly combed blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, Ethan descended the airplane stairs in a perfectly tailored Armani suit. He epitomized success: wealthy, powerful, and in control. But beneath the composed exterior, Ethan carried an emptiness that no deal could fill. His life was an endless cycle of meetings, flights, and lonely nights in penthouses he rarely called home. He had conquered everything except his own heart. Jamaica, to him, was just another stop, another opportunity to finalize the acquisition of Serenity Palms Resort, a project that would expand his investment portfolio in the Caribbean. "Welcome to Jamaica, Mr. Caldwell," a hotel staff member approached, offering a polite smile tinged with the reverence Ethan had grown accustomed to. He nodded, his gaze drifting past the man toward the horizon, where rows of palm trees swayed gently under golden sunlight. Something about the scene, the vivid colors, the sound of waves in the distance, and the faint rhythm of a reggae tune drifting from somewhere, made him pause longer than usual. He wondered when the last time he looked at the world without calculating its value was. Ethan's assistant, Claire, had insisted he spend a few days exploring Jamaican culture before negotiating with the development committee. "It's good for the company image," she said over the phone from New York, her tone persuasive. "The locals will appreciate it if you show some respect for their island." Ethan agreed, though deep down, he pictured cultural exploration as nothing more than a few expensive rum cocktails at the resort bar or a round of golf on a course designed by a celebrity architect. He expected nothing more. His life was designed to avoid surprises. A black SUV transported Ethan from the airport to Montego Bay, where the Serenity Palms Resort stood proudly by the sea. Through the tinted windows, he glimpsed brightly painted houses, children running along the roadside, and street vendors with baskets full of ripe mangoes. There was a rhythm to life here, a freedom he couldn't find in Manhattan's cold, rigid streets. Despite the Caribbean's humid heat, Ethan lowered the window, letting the breeze carry the salty scent of the ocean into the car. Children's laughter, music from a roadside bar, and the steady sound of waves, like the island's heartbeat, made him smile unexpectedly, a rare, uncalculated smile. "First time in Jamaica, sir?" The driver, a middle-aged man with a warm, deep voice, asked through the rearview mirror. Ethan hesitated. "For work, yes," he replied, but the words sounded like a confession. Work had consumed everything. When was the last time he did something purely for joy? He couldn't remember. The driver chuckled softly, asking no further questions, but his eyes seemed to say that Jamaica had a way of changing people, whether they wanted it or not. Serenity Palms appeared like a modern palace, with glistening glass walls and an infinity pool melting into the Caribbean Sea. Ethan's penthouse suite, with a panoramic view of the ocean, was anyone's dream. But to him, it was just another luxurious, soulless space like so many others he'd stayed in. Standing on the balcony, listening to the waves crashing on the shore, Ethan felt a vague unease. All he possessed, homes on 3 continents, staff ready to serve his every whim, and a bank account with countless zeros, suddenly felt insufficient to fill the void within him. He used to believe success was the answer, but now, facing Jamaica's raw beauty, he began to doubt. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep in a room with a king-size bed and Egyptian cotton sheets. Instead of lulling him into dreams, the waves seemed to whisper questions he'd long avoided. Who was he beyond the title of billionaire? What truly made him feel alive? He stepped out onto the balcony, gazing at the moonlight shimmering on the water, and heard reggae music in the distance. Not the curated kind played in hotel lobbies, but something vibrant, real, like the soul of Jamaica itself. Ethan felt curious for the first time in years, not about a deal, but about a world beyond his control. Tomorrow, he would meet his tour guide, someone Claire had described as special. Ethan didn't expect much, probably just a local with cultural knowledge, ready to take him through carefully curated destinations meant to impress wealthy tourists. But deep within him, a small instinct began to stir. With all its beauty and mystery, Jamaica might not be just a stopover. Perhaps it would start a journey he had never prepared for. The bright morning sunlight flooded the lobby of Serenity Palms Resort, reflecting off the glass walls and the gleaming marble floors. Ethan Caldwell descended the stairs, looking casual in a white linen shirt and finely tailored khaki trousers. He had left his Rolex in the safe, but the habit of projecting success was still evident in every confident stride. Today was the day he would begin his cultural exploration, as advised by his assistant Claire. Though he didn't expect much, Ethan felt a strange curiosity, perhaps stirred by last night's reggae music or the moonlight over the sea that had awakened something inside him. At the reception desk, a voice rang out, carrying that distinct musicality of Jamaican English, but also sharp and full of confidence. "Mr. Caldwell, I presume." Ethan turned, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. Standing before him was Nia Thompson, his tour guide. Nia, a Black American woman born in Jamaica, stood with effortless grace, entirely at ease. Her hair was braided into small plaits, accented with tiny wooden beads that shimmered in the light. Her deep brown eyes sparkled with intelligence and a hint of mischief, as if she had already seen through the carefully crafted armor Ethan had worn for years. Her genuine and warm smile made him instinctively compare it to the hundreds of artificial ones he encountered in New York boardrooms. "I'm Nia Thompson," she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, her palm marked with small calluses that told a story of labor and dedication. The simple silver bracelet on her wrist jingled softly as they shook hands, and Ethan noticed something different. No flattery, no gaze lingering on his wealth. "Ready to explore Jamaica?" Nia asked, her tone carrying a slight challenge that caught Ethan off guard. He nodded, trying to mask his discomfort. "I think so," he replied, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. Nia led him outside, not to a gleaming SUV as he had expected, but to a battered Toyota truck painted in vivid blue and yellow, its scratches telling tales of long, winding journeys. "We've got two options," Nia said, opening the door for him with a half smile. "One, the tourist version of Jamaica. Blue Mountain coffee plantations with staged tours, duty-free shops, and a rum factory where they'll sell you a bottle at triple the price. Safe, predictable, Instagram-ready." She paused, eyes studying him as if looking straight into his soul. "Two, the real Jamaica. But that means you'll have to trust me, and I'm guessing trust isn't exactly your strong suit." A jolt ran through Ethan's body. Nia's words weren't just an offer, they were a dare. Trust was a luxury in his world, always accompanied by contracts and clauses. But something about her confidence, authenticity, or that light in her eyes, made him want to step outside his comfort zone. "The real Jamaica," he said, his voice steadier than he expected. Nia smiled, a smile that made his heart beat faster, and motioned for him to climb in. "Good. Let's see how long you last," she said, starting the engine with a cheerful growl. The truck rolled out of Montego Bay, leaving behind the cobbled roads of the resort and heading into the countryside of St. James. Through the window, Ethan saw a completely different Jamaica. Wooden houses painted in reds, yellows, and blues, like a living painting. Banana trees swaying in the breeze, and locals moving with a relaxed rhythm, as if time were not the enemy. The scent of bread toasting on a roadside charcoal grill mingled with the sea air, making Ethan breathe deeper, as though trying to inhale the island itself. Nia drove with the confidence of someone who knew every bend and pothole. She pointed to a blue house with a red roof. "That's Miss May's house. She taught me how to make jerk chicken when I was little. She still cooks for the whole village every Sunday." She spoke of her childhood, a Black American girl raised in Jamaica after her family moved from Harlem in search of a life closer to their roots. "My parents wanted me to know where I came from," Nia said, her gaze distant. "They wanted me to understand that roots aren't just about where you're born. It's about where you belong." Ethan listened, surprised by how open she was. He rarely asked about other people's lives, not because he didn't care, but because he was used to keeping distance. But with Nia, he found himself wanting to know more. "You went to university in Kingston, right?" he asked, recalling the information Claire had provided. "Why'd you come back here?" Nia glanced at him, a faint smile crossing her face. "Because this is home. I studied business and dreamed of turning my family's coffee farm into something bigger, for us and the community. In Kingston, I saw tourism giants swallowing the island. I didn't want to be part of that." Her words touched something deep within Ethan. He, a man who had made fortunes from land deals, suddenly felt discomfort. To him, the Serenity Palms project was just a number, but to Nia, it could be a threat. He wanted to ask more, but Nia shifted the conversation, pointing at a group of children playing soccer by the roadside. "That used to be my little brother's team," she laughed. "They still play here every afternoon, like time never moved." As the truck turned onto a dirt road leading deeper into St. James, Ethan felt a change within himself. Nia was unlike anyone he had ever met. She wasn't impressed by his wealth and didn't seek to please him. Instead, she challenged him, invited him into her world, a world he had never known but was beginning to crave. He looked at her, her braids swaying gently, her hands firm on the steering wheel, and wondered, could he allow himself to be swept away just this once? Ahead, the Thompson family's coffee farm emerged, nestled among lush green hills. Nia stopped the truck, turning to him with a meaningful smile. "Welcome to the real Jamaica, Ethan Caldwell. Ready to get your hands dirty?" Ethan smiled, for the first time in years, not out of politeness, but because he genuinely wanted to be here, in this moment, with the woman making him forget all his carefully laid plans. Nia Thompson's Toyota truck rumbled down the red dirt roads of St. James, leaving behind the glitz of Montego Bay. Sitting in the passenger seat, Ethan Caldwell felt every jolt from the potholes, like a reminder that he had stepped away from his world of comfort. Through the window, he saw endless sugarcane fields, mango trees heavy with fruit, and wooden houses painted in vibrant colors, as if plucked straight from a painter's palette. Children's laughter mingled with birdsong and the faint rhythm of reggae music from an old radio somewhere, forming a symphony Ethan had never heard in any Manhattan boardroom. Nia drove with the ease of someone who knew every curve of the road by heart, one hand on the wheel, the other pointing to landmarks as they passed. "That's the primary school I went to," she said, her voice full of memory. We used to sneak behind the yard to steal mangoes from the principal's garden." She laughed, and Ethan realized that her smile could melt the ice he had built around his heart. A man used to strategic conversations suddenly wanted to hear more, not just about Jamaica, but Nia herself. "You grew up here. Must have been a different kind of childhood," Ethan said, trying to find the right words. Nia glanced at him, her eyes both curious and mischievous. "Different from what? Skyscrapers and limos?" Ethan fumbled for a reply, but before he could answer, Nia continued. "I grew up with the sound of waves as my lullaby, with evenings listening to my grandfather tell stories of our ancestors. My family left Harlem to find a place where we could live in truth, with our roots. Jamaica gave me that." She paused, looking at him. "What about you, Ethan? What shaped you, other than money and power?" Nia's question cut like a sharp blade through Ethan's well-crafted exterior. He wanted to answer easily as in an interview, with a rehearsed story about hard work and ambition. But under Nia's sincere gaze, he couldn't lie. I'm not sure anymore," he admitted, his voice low. "I've spent my whole life building something, but sometimes I wonder what it means." Nia didn't respond immediately. She nodded, as if she understood what he hadn't yet said. They stopped at a small roadside market, where stalls overflowed with mangoes, coconuts, and golden patties. Nia bought 2 patties from an older woman, Miss Ruby, who hugged her like a granddaughter. Nia said best patties in all of St. James, handing one to Ethan. He took a bite, the spicy beef and Jamaican seasoning exploding with flavor. He smiled instinctively. He said better than any 5-star meal I've ever had, and for once, he wasn't exaggerating. Miss Ruby laughed heartily and patted his shoulder. "He's a keeper, Nia. Don't let him run back to New York too soon." As they continued driving, Nia told him about the community she grew up in, people who lived off the land, the sea, and each other. She pointed to a massive almond tree by the road, where locals often gathered to discuss village matters. "Here, we don't just live," she said. "We belong to each other. That's something resorts like Serenity Palms will never understand." Her voice had a subtle edge, and Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He knew his deal involved expanding the resort, but he hadn't considered its impact on people like Nia. He wanted to ask more, but a part of him feared the answers. The road narrowed as they passed through lush, rolling hills. Nia pulled over by a small stream, sunlight dancing on the surface like scattered diamonds. She slipped off her shoes, jumped into the cold water, and gestured for Ethan to follow. "Don't worry, billionaire," she teased. "The water doesn't bite." Ethan used to chlorinated infinity pools, hesitated momentarily before removing his shoes and stepping in. The icy water wrapped around his feet, and for the first time in years, he felt truly present. No numbers, no expectations, just now. Nia sat on a large rock, feet soaking in the water, and spoke of her dreams. She said, "I want my family's coffee farm to become self-sustaining." Her eyes glowing. "Not just to make money, but to preserve this land. So, people here don't have to sell what their ancestors left behind to corporations." She looked at Ethan, and he felt the weight of that look. "Have you ever done something not for profit, Ethan? Something just because it was right?" Nia's question left Ethan silent. He thought of his deals. Land bought cheap, resorts built, communities displaced without a second glance. He wanted to say he wasn't evil, bringing jobs and economic growth. But with Nia, those justifications felt hollow. "No," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "But I want to learn." Nia smiled, not a triumphant smile, but a gentle one, as if she saw something in him he had yet to see in himself. As the sun began to dip, Nia led Ethan to a small hill overlooking the valley. From there, He saw scattered rooftops, coffee fields, and, far off, the glittering line of the Caribbean Sea on the horizon. "This is where I come when I need to think," Nia said, sitting on the grass. Ethan sat beside her, feeling a peace he'd never known. At that moment, there were no ringing phones, no urgent emails, just the wind and their quiet breath in sync. "Thank you," Ethan said softly, "for showing me this." Nia turned to him, her eyes shimmering in the sunset. "Don't thank me yet, Ethan Caldwell. This is just the beginning." She stood, stretched, and motioned for him to return to the truck. "Tomorrow, I'm taking you to my family's farm. Brace yourself. My grandfather doesn't impress easily." Ethan laughed, a genuine laugh he'd nearly forgotten he could feel. As they drove back, he realized that Jamaica and Nia were doing something no business deal ever had, making him feel alive. The morning sunlight shimmered through the coffee leaves, casting a golden glow over the Thompson family farm. Nia Thompson's Toyota truck stopped beneath the shade of an old mango tree, and Ethan Caldwell stepped out, inhaling the fresh air laced with the scent of damp earth and faint coffee blossoms. After yesterday, with the bustling market, the cool stream, and the peaceful moment atop the hill, Ethan felt like he was stepping into an entirely new world, where everything seemed more vivid, more real than any boardroom back in New York. But he also sensed a slight tension. Today, he would meet Nia's family, and something told him they wouldn't be easily impressed by fame or fortune. Nia, her braids neatly tied and her smile playful, led Ethan through rows of lush green coffee plants. "This is my family's farm," she said, her voice full of pride. "4 generations have worked this land. My grandfather Samuel planted the first coffee tree as a boy." Ethan looked around, surprised by the harmony of the landscape. Neat rows of coffee trees, wildflowers growing between them, and the misty silhouette of the blue mountains in the distance. Nothing here resembled the real estate projects he had invested in. No concrete, no gleaming glass, only pure, unfiltered life. They approached a small wooden house painted sky blue, where an older man stood with a cane, watching them with sharp eyes. Samuel Thompson, Nia's grandfather, had a weathered face, but his eyes sparkled with wisdom and a trace of humor. "So this is the billionaire you mentioned," he said in a deep, resonant voice, colored with a distinct Jamaican accent. "Here to see how we live before buying the whole island?" Ethan froze, feeling the heat rise on his face. He was used to reverence or flattery, but Samuel looked at him as if he were just another man, and strangely, that made Ethan feel more at ease. "I don't think he's here to buy the whole island, Grandpa," Nia said with a laugh, patting Samuel's shoulder. "But he does need to learn a thing or two about coffee, and you're the best teacher." Samuel grunted, but his eyes softened. "All right, young man. If you want to be here, you'll have to work. Coffee doesn't pick itself." He handed Ethan a hand-woven wicker basket and pointed toward a row of coffee plants. Ethan took the basket hesitantly, his linen shirt now smudged with dust. He hadn't done manual labor since working a grocery store job as a teenager. But Samuel's challenging gaze and Nia's encouraging smile left him no choice but to try. For the next 2 hours, Ethan learned to distinguish ripe red coffee cherries from green ones, felt the soil beneath his nails, and endured the Caribbean sun on his back. Nia worked beside him, swift and sure-handed, explaining the farm's history as they picked. "My grandfather fought to keep this land," she said. "Back then, big companies tried to buy it to build hotels. He said land isn't just property. It's our roots. It's our story." Ethan listened, guilt beginning to stir in him. He thought of the Serenity Palms deal and the resort expansion plans, and wondered if he was repeating the same threat Nia's family had once faced. Midway through, Samuel called them over to rest under the mango tree. He brought out a jug of homemade ginger drink and poured each a cup. Ethan took a sip. The fiery sweetness caught him off guard. "Better than expensive wine," he said, and Samuel laughed heartily, showing warmth for the first time. The billionaire said that not everything good has to be expensive. Sometimes, real value lies in what's made with love. Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of those words, even if he didn't fully understand them yet. Nia sat beside him, wiping sweat from her forehead and gazing over the coffee fields. "I want to turn this farm into a sustainable business," she said, her voice filled with passion. "Not just selling coffee, but creating jobs, preserving our culture, and showing the world that Jamaica is more than beaches and hotels." But it's not easy. The big corporations, they have money and power. They don't care about people like us. She looked at Ethan, and he felt her gaze like a gentle accusation. He wanted to tell her he was different and wasn't like them, but he knew the truth. His deal might be hurting the very community Nia was trying to protect. Samuel rose, leaning on his cane, and pointed to a smaller coffee tree. "I planted this one the day Nia was born," he said warmly. "I thought it would just be decorative, but it turned out to be stronger than all the rest, just like my granddaughter." He looked at Nia with boundless love, then turned to Ethan. "You know what makes someone strong? Not money, not power. Roots. What keeps you standing when the storm comes." Ethan felt the words strike something profound within him. A man who had built an empire with no real roots suddenly realized he craved them more than any contract he'd ever signed. As the sun rose higher, Nia suggested heading back for lunch. They sat around a simple wooden table, sharing saltfish and flatbread that Nia had prepared. Ethan used to lavish banquets and loved the simplicity, not just the food, but the warmth of shared stories, laughter, and a feeling of belonging. He watched Nia tease her grandfather about the time he burned a stew and felt his heart race. She wasn't just a guide. She was the embodiment of a life he had never dared to dream of. Before they left, Samuel gripped Ethan's hand firmly, his gaze steady. "You're a guest here, but if you want to stay, you must prove you deserve it. Jamaica isn't just a place to visit. It's a place to love." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of those words settles into him. As he and Nia got back into the truck to return to the resort, he looked back at the farm, where the coffee trees swayed gently in the breeze. He knew today had changed him, not because of the manual labor or the ginger drink, but because Nia and her family had shown him a world where value wasn't measured in dollars, but in love and roots. Dawn had just broken, painting the Jamaican sky in radiant shades of soft pink, as Ethan Caldwell drove his rental car through the winding roads of St. James. The night before, after visiting the Thompson family's coffee farm, Nia had texted him a vague location and a message. "Meet me at 6 a.m. No bodyguards. Leave your billionaire ego at home." Though Ethan was used to meticulous planning, today he did something he had never done before. He went alone. No driver, no assistant. Just driven by curiosity and a nameless thrill. After yesterday's hours of coffee picking, Samuel's stories, and the passionate fire in Nia's eyes, Ethan knew Jamaica, and especially Nia, was changing him in ways he never expected. He found Nia on a small, untouched beach, nowhere to be found on any tourist map. She sat on a piece of driftwood, her bare feet buried in sand that glittered like a crushed pearl. Nia wore a coral maxi dress, her braids gently swaying in the sea breeze. When she looked up and smiled, Ethan felt his heart skip a beat. "You made it," she said, not surprised, but faintly pleased. "You might back out, billionaire." Ethan chuckled, kicked off his shoes, and sat beside her, feeling the cool sand beneath his feet. "I don't make many promises," he replied, "but when I do, I keep them." He tried to hide the flustered feeling when the scent of coconut from Nia drifted close. They sat silently for a while, listening to the rhythmic waves and the distant cries of seagulls. With its mossy rocks and coral reefs peeking through the clear water, this beach was a world apart from the lavish resorts Ethan knew so well. "Nia said this place means a lot to me," eyes scanning the ocean. "When I was little, my brother and I dived here for shells. My father taught us to swim and to respect the sea. This is where I feel most free." She turned to him, her deep brown eyes gleaming. "What about you, Ethan? Where do you feel free?" Her question left Ethan silent. He thought of penthouses, luxury holidays in the Maldives, and wine-soaked parties. But none had brought him freedom. I don't know," he admitted, voice low. "Maybe I've never looked for it." Nia didn't judge. She nodded as if she already knew the answer. "Then let me show you today," she said, standing and slipping off her dress to reveal a deep blue bikini that made Ethan swallow hard. "Come on, billionaire. It's time to learn how Jamaicans swim." Nia led him into the water, teaching him how to shallow dive for shells and avoid sea urchins. Ethan used only to pristine infinity pools, stumbled in the waves, prompting Nia to laugh. "You look like a fish out of water," she teased. But when an intense wave knocked him off balance, she grabbed his hand, pulling him closer to steady him. That touch, her hand warm and firm, sent a jolt through him. They kept diving, and when Ethan found a perfect shell, he held it up triumphantly. Nia clapped in delight. "Not bad for a city boy," she said, her smile brighter than the sun. As they rested on a rock jutting from the sea, water dripping from Nia's hair, Ethan couldn't take his eyes off her. She told him old Jamaican legends of sea spirits and pirate treasures, with a passion that mesmerized him. But then, her tone shifted. She said softly, "This beach might not be here much longer." She looked out at the water. Resorts like Serenity Palms are expanding. They want to build another hotel, right here, on beaches like this, where our people have lived for generations. Ethan's stomach twisted. He knew about the expansion plans, but he had never thought of them like this, as a loss, an invasion. "Nia, he began, but she held up a hand. "Don't explain. Just listen. This place isn't just sand and water. It's history. It's home. Have you ever lost something so important that you felt like you weren't yourself anymore?" Her question pierced something deep inside him. He thought of his mother, who had died when he was a child, and how he'd buried that grief under work and wealth. "Yes," he said, his voice raw, "but I didn't know how to hold on to it." Nia looked at him, her gaze softening, as if she could see the pain he had long hidden. She swam closer, close enough that Ethan could feel the warmth of her body in the cool water. "You're scared," she said. "I am not accusing, just observing." "Scared of what?" Ethan asked, though his heart was pounding because he knew the answer. "Scared of this," Nia whispered, gently touching his cheek, her fingers brushing like a breeze. "Scared of me. Scared of what's happening between us." Ethan wanted to deny it, but as her eyes locked onto his, every wall he'd built began to crumble. "I don't do this," he whispered, voice trembling. "I don't let anyone close." Nia didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in, her nose nearly touching his. "Then let me show you what she said." And then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, she kissed him. The kiss was soft but fierce, salty with sea, and sweet with something unspoken. Ethan felt his heart unlock, like a long sealed door blown open by a single touch. When they pulled away, both breathless, their eyes didn't stray. "What was that?" Ethan asked, voice hoarse. Nia smiled, a smile both gentle and daring. "That," she said, "was the beginning." Ethan Caldwell. They returned to the shore, sitting in comfortable silence, hand in hand. Nia told him more about her childhood, beach festivals and songs her mother used to sing, and Ethan opened up about his mother for the first time. She once dreamed he would live a meaningful life, not just a wealthy one. As the sun climbed higher, Nia rose and tugged his hand. "Tomorrow, I want you to meet my mother," she said. "But fair warning, she's even harder to impress than my grandfather." Ethan laughed, but inside, a vague anxiety formed. He knew the Serenity Palms deal was drawing near, and that no matter how sweet this kiss had been, it couldn't erase the fact that he and Nia might soon stand on opposite sides of an invisible line. Under the blazing morning sun of a Jamaican Tuesday, Ethan Caldwell drove back to the Thompson family's coffee farm, his heart pounding with anticipation and dread. After yesterday's secret beach visit, with a kiss that shook his world and the candid moments shared with Nia Thompson, Ethan felt like he stood at the edge of a new life. But as he turned onto the dirt road leading to the farm, a ripple of unease stirred in his chest. Nia's message that morning, "Come to the farm, my mother wants to meet you," carried a seriousness he hadn't seen in her before. The farm appeared as lush and peaceful as ever, but today the air felt heavier. Nia stood under the mango tree, her usual playful smile absent. Beside her was a tall, slender woman in her 50s, exuding authority with sharp, discerning eyes that seemed to pierce through any facade. Dr. Olivia Thompson, Nia's mother, wore an elegant blouse, her salt and pepper hair neatly tied back, emanating the calm command of someone used to leading. Samuel, Nia's grandfather, sat on a wooden chair nearby, his eyes pensive, the playful glint from the day before now gone. "Ethan, this is my mother, Dr. Olivia Thompson," Nia said, her voice steady but tight. Ethan stepped forward and extended his hand. "A pleasure to meet you, Dr. Thompson," he said, trying to sound confident. Olivia shook his hand, firm, cold. "Mr. Caldwell," she replied evenly, though her tone had an edge. "I've heard a great deal about you, perhaps more than you realize." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. Olivia's eyes weren't just assessing, they were warning him. They sat around a wooden table beneath the tree, where Nia had placed a tray of homemade lemonade. Samuel took a sip, but avoided looking at Ethan as if burdened by a silent truth. Olivia got straight to the point. She said, "Nia tells me you're here for business," staring directly at Ethan. "Specifically, the expansion of the Serenity Palms Resort. I want to know your intentions with this island and the people who live here." Ethan froze. He hadn't expected the subject to surface so quickly, so bluntly. He glanced at Nia, who kept her head down, her expression a mix of worry and disappointment. It's a business project," Ethan began, carefully choosing his words. "Serenity Palms plans to build a new resort on the East Coast. It'll bring jobs, boost tourism revenue, and improve infrastructure." It was a line he'd rehearsed countless times in boardrooms, but here, under Olivia's piercing gaze, it sounded hollow. Nia looked up, her voice low but sharp. "The East Coast? Do you mean the beach we visited yesterday? Where fishermen work, where children learn to swim, where our community has lived for generations?" Ethan's stomach twisted. He had known about the expansion plans, but he had never connected them to that beach, the one where he and Nia had collected seashells, where they had kissed. "Nia, I didn't know it was," he started, but Olivia cut in, her voice slicing through the air. Didn't know, or didn't care, she asked. Do you understand that the beach is the lifeline of dozens of families? That it's not just a piece of land for your next hotel, but a part of our history, our culture? She leaned forward, her eyes unwavering. Jamaica is not the playground of billionaires, Mr. Caldwell. It's our home. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the chest. He looked to Samuel for support, but the older man only shook his head. When they built the first resort 40 years ago, Samuel said, voice low and deliberate, they promised jobs and prosperity. But we got skyrocketing land prices, displaced families, and the best positions going to outsiders. Now, you come with the same promises. How are you any different? Samuel's question echoed in Ethan's mind. He wanted to say he wasn't like them, that he was changing, that Nia had made him see the world differently. But the truth was that he had known about the deal all along and had chosen to ignore the consequences. He looked at Nia, saw tears glistening in her eyes, and felt something in his chest tighten. Nia, I didn't mean to hurt you or your family, he said, voice hoarse. These past few days have meant something to me. You mean something to me. Nia shook her head, her voice trembling but firm. Mean something? Then why didn't you tell me about the project? You let me take you everywhere, shared my home, my culture, while knowing it might all be destroyed for your profit? She stood, stepping away, her back to him, as if to hide her breaking composure. Ethan felt an invisible wall rising between them, colder than any boardroom he'd ever faced. Olivia stood too, still regal, though her voice softened. Mr. Caldwell, I'm not here to judge you, but I need you to understand. My daughter has spent her life protecting this island, preserving what our ancestors left us. If you genuinely care, you must do more than say sorry. She gave him one last look, then turned into the house, leaving Ethan with Samuel and Nia in silence. Samuel placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, his expression now gentler. You still have time to choose, son, he said, but the right choice is never easy. He rose and followed Olivia, leaving Ethan and Nia alone beneath the mango tree. Ethan stepped toward her, but she held up a hand. Don't, she said, her voice choked. I need time, Ethan. I thought you were different. Now, I'm not sure anymore. She turned and walked into the house, leaving Ethan feeling like he'd lost the most precious thing he'd ever had. He looked out over the coffee fields, the green trees swaying gently in the breeze. But now, they carried a different weight. They were a reminder of what he might destroy if he didn't change. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a message from Claire about tomorrow's meeting with the development board. But Ethan didn't care about business for the first time in his life. He only thought of Nia, the beach, the Thompson family, and a question he had never dared to ask. Who am I, and who do I genuinely want to be? The Thompson family's coffee fields stretched wide under the midday sun, yet the atmosphere at the farm today felt as heavy as an approaching storm. Ethan Caldwell stood beneath the shade of the mango tree, his heart pounding after the painful confrontation with Nia Thompson, her mother, Dr. Olivia Thompson, and her grandfather, Samuel. Nia's accusation that he had hidden the Serenity Palms expansion plan, threatening the community's beloved beach, echoed in his mind. The disappointment in her eyes, Olivia's cold silence, and Samuel's grave warning had torn apart the armor Ethan had built over so many years. For the first time, he felt like a billionaire facing a failed deal and a man facing his conscience. Nia stood a few steps away, her back turned, her shoulders trembling, as if holding back emotion. Ethan wanted to reach out, to tell her he wasn't the person she thought he was, But Olivia's words haunted him. If you care about my daughter, you need to do more than say sorry. His phone buzzed incessantly. A message from Assistant Claire reminding him about the afternoon meeting with the development committee, where he was expected to sign the final Serenity Palms contract. But now, millions of dollars, profit charts, and promises of economic growth seemed distant and hollow. Ethan took a deep breath, gazing over the coffee fields, where the green plants swayed in the breeze, as if whispering a challenge. He thought of the secret beach where Nia had taught him to dive for shells, where they had shared their first kiss. He thought of this farm, where Samuel had spoken of roots and family strength. And he thought of Nia, the woman who had made him feel alive, who had shown him a world where value wasn't measured in money. "Nia," he called, his voice hoarse but resolute. She turned, her dark brown eyes shining with tears, filled with hurt and challenge. "What can you say to make this right?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Do you even understand what you're doing to this island? To us?" Nia's question was like a dagger, but it also awakened a deep determination inside Ethan. He took out his phone, his hand trembling slightly as he opened his contacts and found the number of his chief lawyer, Harrison. "Let me prove it," he said, locking eyes with Nia. She furrowed her brow, unsure of his intent, but unwilling to look away. Ethan dialed and put the call on speaker so Nia could hear. "Harrison, it's me," he said as the lawyer answered. "About the Serenity Palms deal. I'm canceling it, effective immediately." A stunned silence followed on the other end before Harrison's panicked voice broke through. "Ethan, what are you saying? We've invested $50 million. The board will be furious. Stocks will crash, and—" "I don't care," Ethan cut in, his voice firmer than ever. "Cancel the contract. Find a way out without further harming the local community. I'll take responsibility." He ended the call before Harrison could protest further. Silence enveloped the farm, broken only by the wind rustling through the coffee plants. Nia stared at him, eyes wide, as if unable to believe what she'd just heard. "What did you do?" she whispered, stepping closer. Ethan gave a faint, relieved smile tinged with fear. "I just gave up $50 million, he said, "and maybe my career. But I can't let it destroy what you love, Nia." Nia shook her head, still uncertain. "Why, Ethan? Why now?" He stepped nearer, close enough for her to see the sincerity in his eyes. "Because of you," he said, low and steady. "Because these past days, you showed me what matters. Not money, not power, but people like you, your family, that beach. I don't want to be the one who takes that away." Nia looked at him, tears trailing down her cheeks. But this time, they were tears of relief, of hope. She stepped forward and touched his chest, feeling his heart pounding. "Are you sure?" she asked, voice thick with emotion. "This isn't a game, Ethan. This is our life." "I've never been more sure," he replied. This time, he took her hand, feeling the warmth and strength in her fingers. They stood together in the coffee field, knowing everything had changed forever. Olivia and Samuel emerged from inside, clearly having overheard the entire call. Olivia looked at Ethan with new eyes, not cold, but reconsidering, as if seeing him for the first time. She said, "You just did something few in your position would dare." Voice deep, but no longer sharp. "But don't expect me to trust you yet. Actions speak louder than words." Samuel smiled lightly, patting Ethan on the shoulder. "You chose the right path, son," he said, "but it won't be easy." Ethan nodded, knowing the older man was right. Canceling the deal was only the first step. He would face the board, angry shareholders, and an uncertain future. But when he looked at Nia, seeing her eyes filled with hope and admiration, he knew it was all worth it. Nia led Ethan away from the table to a corner of the farm where younger coffee plants grew in neat rows. She said, "This is where I planted my first tree," pointing to a small but healthy plant. "I was 10 years old, and Grandpa said each tree is a promise to the land, family, and future." She looked at him, her gaze gentle but firm. "You just made a promise, Ethan. Please don't break it." He gripped her hand tighter, feeling the weight of that vow. "I won't," he said, and this time he believed himself. As the sun began to tilt, Ethan and Nia stood side by side, looking out over the valley where the farm merged with the Blue Mountains. He knew this decision would change everything, not just the deal, but himself. Nia leaned her head on his shoulder, and in that moment, amidst the coffee fields, Ethan felt a peace he'd never known. But he also knew the road ahead would be full of challenges, and he would need all the strength Jamaica and Nia had given him to face them. The Thompson family's coffee fields lay silent under the sunset, the coffee plants swaying as if whispering blessings over Ethan Caldwell's bold choice. Just hours earlier, he had canceled the $50 million Serenity Palms deal, which left Nia Thompson looking at him with astonishment and hope. But as the golden light faded over the Blue Mountains, Ethan felt the weight of his decision. His phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from the board of directors, angry messages from shareholders, urgent emails from Assistant Claire with the subject, "Be careful, Ethan." He switched off the phone for the first time, not caring about the world he'd built in New York. Nia stood beside him, her gaze softer than the tense moment before. "Do you know what you just did?" she asked, her voice gentle but still tinged with doubt. Ethan smiled faintly, feeling both freed and uneasy. He replied, "I just burned a big bridge looking over the valley. But I don't regret it. Not if it means keeping your smile." Nia shook her head, but the corner of her mouth lifted. "You sound good, billionaire. But words are easier than actions. This community won't trust you so easily." Dr. Olivia Thompson, Nia's mother, stepped out of the wooden house. Her eyes remained sharp, but no longer as cold as before. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "your decision is a beginning, but Jamaica has seen too many broken promises. If you want to stay, you must prove you're not just a foreigner passing through." Ethan nodded, sensing the seriousness in her words. Samuel, Nia's grandfather, rose from his chair and patted Ethan's shoulder. "You did the right thing, but the road ahead won't be easy. Are you ready to get your hands dirty a little more?" Ethan smiled, this time genuinely. "I've already started, sir." The days that followed were a whirlwind. News of Ethan's deal cancellation spread like wildfire. Business papers dubbed him the Reckless Billionaire. His company's stock plunged 15% in a single day, and the board summoned an emergency meeting demanding explanations. Ethan refused to return to New York, choosing to stay in Jamaica instead, renting a small house near the Thompson farm. He sold his Manhattan penthouse, let go of his staff, and began learning to live. Every morning, he rose at dawn, working alongside Nia and Samuel on the farm, picking coffee, tending the soil, and listening to stories of Jamaica's history. The local community was initially skeptical. The people of St. James, accustomed to being ignored by investors, eyed him as a wealthy outsider playing rustic. But Nia, with patience and faith, helped him integrate. She brought him to community gatherings where he learned to play dominoes with the elders, eat fiery jerk chicken, and listen to reggae songs sung by village children. One night, at a small festival, Ethan tried to dance ska with Nia, his clumsy steps drawing laughter from the crowd. "You're terrible, billionaire," Nia teased, but she held his hand tighter, her eyes sparkling with joy. Nia also shared more about herself. She spoke of her years in Kingston studying business, hoping to bring knowledge back to help her family's farm. "I've seen big companies swallow up land, she said one evening, as they sat by a small fire after a day's work. I want to prove we can stand on our own, that our coffee can compete without selling our roots. Ethan listened, admiration for her growing. He began to see Nia not just as a guide, but as a warrior fighting for her community with a strength he had never seen in any boardroom. But not everything was smooth. One afternoon, while Ethan and Nia checked the coffee trees, a local man named Jacob approached, his face tense. I heard you canceled the hotel project, he said suspiciously. But who's to say you won't change your mind? We've seen people like you come, promise, then leave. Ethan felt the words hit like a blow but kept calm. I'm here to stay, Mr. Jacob, he said. I want to help, not harm. Jacob shook his head, but Nia placed a hand on his shoulder, whispering, Give him time, Uncle Jacob. He's trying. Jacob nodded reluctantly, but his gaze remained guarded. Ethan and Nia sat on her porch that night, watching the moonlight shimmer over the valley. I'm afraid I'm not good enough for this place, Ethan admitted softly. I've spent a lifetime building things that don't last. How do I know I can do something meaningful? Nia turned to him, her eyes gentle but unwavering. Meaning doesn't come from what you build, Ethan. It comes from what you give. You gave our beach a chance. Now, give yourself a chance. She took his hand, and at that moment, Ethan felt a new certainty, that he was not just trying to redeem himself, but searching for a home. As they stood to go inside, Nia pointed to a bright star in the sky. Here, we call that the guiding star, she said. It reminds us that no matter the path's hard, there's always light to follow. Ethan looked at her, feeling his heart full. He knew his journey in Jamaica was only beginning, and the challenges ahead, from skeptical locals to pressures from his old world, would test everything he had become. But with Nia by his side, he was ready to face it all. The early morning sunlight glittered on the coffee plants of the Thompson farm, casting a gentle silver sheen across the fields. Now accustomed to rising at dawn, Ethan Caldwell stood among the rows of plants, his hands stained with red soil, and the faint aroma of coffee lingering in the air. 3 months had passed since he canceled the $50 million Serenity Palms deal, a decision that shook the business world of New York and cost him a fortune. But in Jamaica, besides Nia Thompson and her family, Ethan felt he was discovering something more precious, a purpose. Today, he and Nia were preparing to launch a new project, Thompson Coffee Company, a social enterprise aiming to bring Jamaican coffee to the world without losing the island's cultural roots. Nia, her braids neat and eyes alight with passion, stood by a wooden table in the small farmhouse, spreading papers and business plans. She said, "We need to cut out the intermediaries," pointing at a cost chart. "If we sell directly to international distributors, we can guarantee fair prices for farmers and preserve the coffee's quality." Ethan nodded, admiring her sharp insight. He had managed billion-dollar deals, but Nia's plan, smaller in scale, carried a more profound meaning he had never experienced. He offered that I could connect with some U.S. and European distributors, but we need a strong brand, a story that makes people want to buy our coffee. Nia smiled, pulling out a simple packaging sample from her bag, a burlap sack printed with the Blue Mountains and the words, "Thompson Coffee, the soul of Jamaica." "This is our story," she said. "Not just coffee, but culture, community, and roots." Ethan looked at the design and felt an unfamiliar pride. He wasn't just an investor. He was part of this dream, a dream Nia had nurtured since her university days in Kingston. But the road was not easy. Despite his weeks spent working on the farm and attending local events, the St. James community still eyed Ethan warily. One morning, while meeting with a group of farmers to discuss collaboration, Lena, a veteran coffee grower, spoke up. "You say you want to help, But how do we know you're not just building a brand to sell out to a big corporation? She asked skeptically. Ethan felt the words strike like a dagger, but stayed calm. I understand your concerns, he said. I was once part of that world, but here to do the right thing. If you give me a chance, I will prove it. Nia placed her hand on Lena's shoulder, whispering, Look at what he's done. He canceled the deal to save the beach. Give him time. Nia's patience and Ethan's sincerity slowly softened suspicion. They hosted coffee tastings at the farm, inviting villagers to sample and give feedback. Drawing on his business experience, Ethan proposed refining the roasting process to preserve the distinctive flavor of Blue Mountain coffee, while Nia ensured every step honored Jamaican tradition. One afternoon, after finishing their first batch for export, Samuel entered the processing shed, inhaled the rich aroma, and nodded with approval. You're beginning to understand, son, he said, patting Ethan's shoulder. But don't let it get to your head. Ethan laughed, feeling the older man's acceptance as a greater victory than any contract. Yet the pressure from Ethan's old world didn't vanish. An email from the board demanded he return to New York to manage the fallout, accompanied by threats of legal action if he failed to recoup the $50 million loss. Ethan read the email by the fire that evening, his gaze thoughtful. Nia, sitting beside him, sensed his tension. They haven't let you go yet, have they? She asked. Ethan sighed, tossing a twig into the flames. They think I'm crazy. They may be right. I gave up everything. Penthouse, reputation, control. But here, with you, I feel alive for the first time. Nia squeezed his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. You're not crazy, she said softly but firmly. You're choosing a different path, a more challenging path, but you're not walking it alone. She rested her head on his shoulder, and at that moment, the firelight illuminated her face as Ethan felt a newfound certainty. He wasn't just helping Nia build a business. He was building a life, a home, with her. The community began to change its view of Ethan. One evening at a village gathering, Jacob, the same man who had doubted him, brought a bottle of homemade rum and invited Ethan to drink. He said, You're not bad, billionaire, a rare smile breaking across his weathered face. But if you hurt Nia, this village will throw you into the sea. Ethan laughed heartily, raising his glass to Jacob. He said, I promise I won't. And for the first time, he felt he belonged here. As night fell, Ethan and Nia stood on a hill overlooking the farm, the moonlight casting a silver carpet over the coffee plants. We'll make it, won't we? Ethan asked, his voice tinged with worry, but full of hope. Nia turned to him, her eyes shining like the guiding star she had once shown him. We won't just make it, Ethan. We'll do it right. For Jamaica, the community, and ourselves. Ethan took her hand, feeling the strength of their shared promise. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, from competing with big brands to winning over the community. But with Nia beside him, he was ready to face it all. The morning sun filtered through the coffee plants, bathing the Thompson farm in a warm golden light. Now accustomed to Jamaica's slower pace of life, Ethan Caldwell stood amid the fields holding a small hoe, tending the soil around the young coffee plants. 6 months had passed since he canceled the Serenity Palms deal, a decision that had shattered his reputation in New York, but had given him a new life beside Nia Thompson and the St. James community. The Thompson Coffee Company, the shared dream of Ethan and Nia, was gradually taking shape. Still, Ethan knew that truly belonging here required more than planting coffee. He needed to earn the trust of the Thompson family, especially Dr. Olivia Thompson, Nia's mother, who still maintained a cautious distance from him. Nia, her braids glistening in the sunlight, stepped out of the wooden house carrying a tray of ginger lemonade. She teased, You're improving, billionaire, handing him a cold glass. Ethan smiled, wiping sweat from his brow. "I'm learning from the best teacher," he replied warmly, looking at her. Their relationship had deepened through months of working together. However, Ethan still felt an invisible barrier, not from Nia, but from Olivia, who regarded him as a wealthy outsider who might leave at any moment. Olivia, head of pediatrics at Kingston Public Hospital, was a strong woman, carrying memories of Jamaica's exploitation by foreign investors. Though Ethan had canceled the deal and committed to the community, she remained wary. One morning, as Ethan and Nia prepared their first export batch of coffee, Olivia unexpectedly appeared at the farm. "I want to speak with Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice steady but serious. Nia glanced at Ethan with concern, but nodded and left them alone. They sat beneath the mango tree where Ethan had faced Olivia's questioning after the Serenity Palms ordeal. Olivia's eyes were sharp, seeming to read every thought. "I see what you've done," she began. "Canceling the deal, working on the farm, helping my daughter with the coffee company. But I need to know, are you here for Nia or to prove something to yourself?" Her question was a knife cutting to Ethan's deepest fear, that he might use Jamaica to escape his former life's emptiness. Ethan took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "At first, maybe it was for me," he admitted softly. "I came here for a deal, but Nia, you, Grandpa Samuel, and this community have shown me what I was missing. A purpose, a home. I'm staying for Nia because I love her and want to be part of this place, not just a passing visitor." Olivia was silent, her eyes fixed on him as if weighing each word. "Love isn't enough," she finally said. "Nia needs someone who understands the value of this island, not just in words, but in actions." The chance to prove himself came sooner than Ethan expected. One afternoon, Nia learned that Kingston Public Hospital, where Olivia worked, was facing a shortage of pediatric medical equipment. After discussing with Nia, Ethan quietly contacted a charity he had partnered with before and donated $2 million to purchase new machines for the hospital, requesting anonymity. But with her sharp intuition, Olivia soon discovered the source of the funds. At a family dinner, she looked at Ethan with a warmth rarely seen. "Do you think I don't know who's behind the new equipment?" she said, half joking, half serious. Ethan blushed, but Nia laughed, holding his hand under the table. "Mom, he wants to help," she said. Olivia nodded, a rare smile curving her lips. "All right, Mr. Caldwell, you score this round, but I'm still watching you." Sitting at the table's head, Samuel laughed heartily, raising his ginger drink. "Consider yourself through the first round, son." Ethan laughed, feeling like a great weight had been lifted from his chest. For the first time, he thought he was not only Nia's partner, but part of this family. The St. James community also began to accept Ethan more. At a weekend market, Miss Ruby, the patties vendor, gave him a free pastry, saying, "You're doing well with Nia's coffee. Please don't disappoint us." Now sun-kissed and smiling more freely, Ethan thanked her, feeling the warmth of acceptance. He and Nia continued working with local farmers, expanding partnerships to supply coffee for Thompson Coffee Company. One evening, at a coffee tasting event for villagers, Ethan stood before the crowd and shared their vision. "We're not just selling coffee. We're telling Jamaica's story, your story, to the world." His words were met with applause, and for the first time, Ethan truly felt he belonged. But challenges remained. A message from Ethan's lawyer warned that a major shareholder was threatening to sue him for the $50 million loss from Serenity Palms. Ethan read the message beneath the moonlight on Nia's porch, anxiety creeping back. Nia, sensing his tension, sat beside him. "They can't pull you back, can they?" she asked, her voice full of worry. Ethan took her hand, his eyes firm. They might try, but I chose this place. I chose you. I won't go back. Nia rested her head on his shoulder, and in that moment, Ethan knew that no matter how hard his old world tried to pull him back, Jamaica and Nia were where his heart truly belonged. Ethan felt a new certainty as they stood, looking out over the coffee fields, shimmering in the moonlight. The Thompson family, the St. James community, and the shared dream with Nia shaped him into a new man. Not billionaire Ethan Caldwell, but Ethan, the man learning to love and live authentically. The late afternoon sun bathed the Thompson family's coffee fields in golden light, the coffee plants sparkling like a vibrant carpet at the foot of the Blue Mountains. Ethan Caldwell stood in the middle of the farm, his heart pounding with a nervous excitement he had never felt in any billion-dollar boardroom. 9 months had passed since he first set foot in Jamaica, a trip he thought was only about the Serenity Palms deal, but which turned out to be a journey of rebirth. Now, with the Thompson Coffee Company growing and the increasing acceptance from the St. James community, Ethan felt he had finally found a true home, and the woman he wanted to share his life with, Nia Thompson. Today, the farm was livelier than usual. Nia, her braids neat and smile radiant, was hosting a small celebration to mark the company's first export batch. Villagers gathered, bringing patties, ginger drinks, and laughter that echoed through the fields. Samuel, Nia's grandfather, sat under the mango tree, telling stories of the farm's early days, while Dr. Olivia Thompson, Nia's mother, spoke with farmers about plans to expand cooperation. Wearing a simple linen shirt and sun-kissed skin, Ethan blended into the crowd, helping distribute coffee and listening to villagers' stories. To them, he was no longer the billionaire. He was Ethan, the man who chose to stay. But Ethan had a secret plan. In his shirt pocket, he kept a simple ring Samuel had helped him prepare, a finely carved coffee wood band inlaid with a blue stone from the Blue Mountains. He had quietly consulted Samuel and Olivia the previous week, and though Olivia still wore her serious expression, she had nodded with a faint smile. "If you hurt my daughter, no one will save you," she warned, but her eyes showed acceptance. Samuel, with a mischievous grin, said, "You picked the right one, son. Don't mess this up." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant orange, Ethan signaled for Nia to join him in the middle of the coffee fields, where the young trees they had planted together now stood tall. Sensing something special, the villagers gradually quieted, their curious eyes following. Nia, in a fitted blue dress, looked at Ethan with suspicion. "What are you doing, billionaire?" she asked, teasing, but with a trace of worry. Ethan smiled and took her hand, feeling the familiar warmth of her fingers interlaced with his. "Nia," he began, his voice trembling but full of emotion. "9 months ago, I came here as a stranger, thinking I knew everything about life. But you taught me what truly matters. Love, family, community. You gave me a home, a purpose, and a reason to wake up every day." He knelt on the red earth, took the ring from his pocket, and held it up before Nia's astonished eyes. "Nia Thompson, you are the soul of Jamaica, the heart of mine. Will you marry me? Will you help me build a meaningful life together right here?" Time seemed to stop. Nia covered her mouth, tears sparkling in her deep brown eyes. The villagers held their breath. Samuel smiled proudly, and Olivia stood beside him, her gaze softer than ever. Nia looked at Ethan, seeing not the billionaire who arrived by private jet, but the man who had gotten his hands dirty for the farm, who had given up everything for their beach and loved her with all his heart. "Yes," she whispered, voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Ethan, I will marry you." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Samuel raised his cane, shouting, "Bring out the rum!" The villagers laughed loudly, pulling Ethan and Nia into embraces. Olivia stepped forward, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You did well," she said warmly. "Welcome to the family, Ethan." Ethan felt a warmth spread through him, as if he had finally found where he belonged. Samuel, with a twinkle in his eye, whispered, "You're officially one of the Thompsons now. Please don't make me throw you into the sea." The evening continued with reggae music from old speakers, villagers dancing under the moonlight, and the aroma of jerk chicken filling the air. Ethan and Nia, hand in hand, danced a slow ska, his steps still clumsy but full of joy. "You know," Nia said, resting her head against his chest, "I never thought I'd love a billionaire." Ethan laughed heartily, holding her tighter. "I'm not a billionaire anymore," he replied. "I'm just the man who loves you and spends my life proving it." Ethan reflected on his journey as they paused to catch their breath, watching the crowd laughing and talking. He had given up penthouses, reputation, and controlled life in exchange for moments like this, the laughter of Samuel, Olivia's warm gaze, and Nia's love. But he also knew this proposal was not just a promise to Nia, but a commitment to Jamaica and the community that had embraced him. A message from his lawyer, unread in his phone, announced that the shareholder lawsuit had been settled. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel the need to reply immediately. His old world was behind him, and the new world, with Nia, the Thompson family, and the coffee fields, was all he needed. Under the moonlight, Nia pointed to a bright star. "The guiding star," she said, smiling. "It brought you here, and now it will lead us forward." Ethan kissed her forehead, feeling his heart overflow. The proposal amid the coffee fields was not just the beginning of their love. It was a vow to a life tied to Jamaica and the values he had learned from this island. The sun rose over the blue mountains, bathing the Thompson farm in a golden light, a natural blessing. A year had passed since Ethan Caldwell's proposal to Nia Thompson amid the coffee fields, and now they stood side by side, hand in hand, at a newly opened small cafe in Montego Bay called The Guiding Star. The cafe, with its vibrant blue and golden walls, embodied their shared dream, a place where tourists and locals alike could enjoy Thompson coffee, hear stories of Jamaica, and feel the island's soul. With sun-kissed skin and a relaxed smile, Ethan was no longer the cold billionaire from New York. He was a husband, a member of the St. James community, and a man who had found the true meaning of life. The Thompson Coffee Company had become a symbol of sustainable development in Jamaica. From the first export batch, the company expanded cooperation with over 30 farming families, providing stable jobs and fair prices for Blue Mountain coffee. Using his business experience, Ethan connected with distributors in the U.S., Canada, and Europe, ensuring every bag of coffee told a story of Jamaica's roots. Nia is passionate about preserving culture and supervising production to maintain traditional quality. One morning, while inspecting a new coffee shipment at the farm, Nia held a bag printed with the Blue Mountains and smiled. "We did it, Ethan," she said. "It's not just coffee. We're keeping our promise to the community." The St. James community, once skeptical of Ethan, now embraced him as one of their own. Miss Ruby, the patties seller, often brought hot pastries to the cafe, teasing him, "You make good coffee, but you can't beat my jerk chicken." Mr. Jacob, who had once questioned him, now sat playing dominoes with Ethan under the shade of a sea almond tree, sharing stories of Jamaica's history. Samuel, Nia's grandfather, became Ethan's mentor, teaching him about coffee and how to live slowly and cherish every moment. One afternoon, as Ethan helped Samuel repair a fence around the farm, the older man laughed heartily. "You're no longer a city boy," he said. "You're Jamaican now." Dr. Nia Thompson, Nia's mother, had accepted Ethan. After his quiet donation to Kingston Public Hospital, she began to see him as part of the family. At a New Year's celebration on the farm, Olivia pulled Ethan aside, handing him a glass of ginger drink. "You've done more than I expected," she said warmly. "Not just for Nia, but for all of us." "Thank you, Ethan." He bowed his head, moved by her words. "Thank you for giving me a chance," he replied. And for the first time, they embraced. A hug of reconciliation and kinship. Ethan and Nia's married life was a symphony of love and companionship. Their wedding 3 months ago at the farm lacked the extravagance of Ethan's old world. No expensive champagne, no designer gowns. Instead, steel drum beats, salted fish and flatbreads prepared by villagers, and dances lasting until dawn filled the night. In a simple white dress adorned with wildflowers in her hair, Nia was more beautiful than any gem Ethan had ever seen. As they danced a slow reggae under the moonlight, Ethan whispered, "I've never been happier." Nia smiled, resting her head on his chest. "This is only the beginning, my love." The Guiding Star Cafe quickly became the community's heart. Every day, Ethan and Nia welcomed tourists from everywhere, sharing the journey of Thompson coffee, from field to cup. They also organized workshops for local children, teaching them how to grow coffee and be proud of Jamaican culture. One afternoon, as Ethan guided a group of children to pick coffee, he saw them laughing on the beach that Serenity Palms had once nearly destroyed. He thought of his decision years ago, the $50 million he gave up, and realized it was the best investment he had ever made. But not everything was perfect. Large coffee brands began competing with Thompson Coffee Company to undercut prices and capture the market. Ethan and Nia had to work twice as hard, improving processes and seeking new markets. One evening, as they reviewed financial reports at the cafe, Nia sighed. "Sometimes I fear we're not strong enough," she admitted. Ethan held her hand, his eyes steady. "We've overcome the impossible," he said. "Together, we will succeed." Nia smiled, and they continued working, the cafe's light shining like a lighthouse in the night. Under the moonlight, Ethan and Nia stood on the secret beach where they had once dived for shells and shared their first kiss. Like Jamaica's heartbeat, the steady waves mingled with the laughter of children playing in the distance. "Do you regret it?" Nia asked, her eyes sparkling. Ethan thought of penthouses, private jets, and the old life he left behind. Then he looked at Nia, the woman who had taught him that true wealth was love and community. "Not at all," he said, pulling her into his arms. "You gave me everything I needed." They stood there, embracing, with the blue mountains as their backdrop and the guiding star shining brightly above. Ethan Caldwell, once a billionaire who owned everything but nothing, was now a man who had learned that actual value lies in what you give. To Nia, Jamaica, and his heart. Their legacy, Thompson Coffee Company, the Guiding Star Cafe, and their everlasting love, would live on like the island's light that led him to a real life.